Well, good morning, everybody. Continuing Wednesdays, talking through joy. This week was about currently sharing joy, right? How we can do that with others and do it in the ways that are productive, helpful to us and other people. So, just kind of recap from Monday's email: 3 points to make about sharing joy. One is the packaging we put it in, right? We've all been around people who are overwhelming because they aren't aware of the people around them. So if your joy is super intense or you don't have the understanding of the people around you, you just pay attention to that packaging because it's going to be much better if you meet them where they are at and don't overwhelm them with your presentation of joy. So wrote some things along those lines. Second is the idea of empathy, a great way to share joy and experience it more. That if you can, I mean, it's a uniquely human characteristic to be empathetic. And so when you can enter into someone else's life and experience their joy, it maximizes theirs because you're understanding their experience, but it also rubs off on you. So it's kind of this give and take that goes both ways. So your joy is better when it is shared via this powerful tool of empathy. And then finally, this idea of patience with joy. It can be frustrating when you're really joyful and you're walking around and someone around you doesn't have the same amount of joy you do, and it can create this tension. But if you don't offer patience to that person, then it kind of takes away some of your joy, and it's another obstacle for them in experiencing the joy they want to have. So we'll talk about that more next week of how to rediscover some joy when you've had some obstacles that get in the way. But those three main ideas were presented, including some exercises, things to be paying attention to, including the idea of giving some encouragement, sharing some joy through some really tangible acts, or maybe writing a note, sending some encouragement, speaking some life into somebody as an opportunity to be able to be intentional to do that. But also, second, about sharing joy with yourself is to be able to make a list of the things that have brought you joy over the course of, say, this summer or recent events. So you can save that, catalog it, bring it in, because you might need to share yourself some reminders about joy as you go through the course of the weeks and months ahead, knowing that every day will not necessarily be full of joy, and you want to be reminded of the things that still work. So thinking about sharing joy with other people and the packaging that matters, I was thinking about what are some examples of sharing gifts that did not always convey the best message, or maybe it was good for somebody they thought was going forward, and someone didn't necessarily appreciate it the same way. Found a website talking about presidential gifts that necessarily weren't the best received. In 2014, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott demonstrated his admiration for President Obama, so he sent the president a 9 foot long longboard. The surfboard is blue and white like Air Force One, and bears the presidential seal. I'm not sure if that made it in the White House and sticking around, or just was buried somewhere as it went forward. Let's see if I can say this name right. Nikita Khrushchev in 1961 gave President Kennedy, a dog named Pushinka, which means fluffy in Russian. As it turns out, Pushinka was the offspring of a dog the Soviets had successfully sent into space, placing them ahead of America in the space race. So, an interesting little jab gift, not necessarily appreciated by President Kennedy. And one more that I thought was interesting, since it's tied to cheese. In 1835, a dairy farmer from Oswego County, New York, presented Andrew Jackson with a 1,400-pound wheel of cheese decorated with mottos and paintings. For 2 years, the cheese wheel stayed in the foyer of the White House. But finally, in honor of George Washington's birthday celebration in 1837, Jackson invited the public to enjoy some free cheese. Every last bit of the cheese was gone before 2 hours had passed, save for the smell, which reportedly lasted a long time. So, some presidential gifts that weren't always done well, but an interesting website nonetheless. There's more there on the link. Related to us and the questions that we come into, speaking of gifts, what's an example of one of the best, or if you want to go worst, gifts you've ever received? Did you get a 1,400-pound wheel of cheese ever presented to you? Or a 9 foot longboard from Australia? What are some of the best gifts or worst gifts you've received, since we've been talking about sharing joy in a good way or bad way. Examples? Wow. I'm just going to repeat that so it makes the video because that's a good one. So you got a pocket knife from a registered sex offender parent on the last day of school. Okay. Yeah, that I'm assuming that counts as the worst gift. Or now you can defend yourself a little better. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Any others? Best or worst gift? Wow. An empty CD case. Hidden messages in there somewhere from a sister-in-law. Okay. Any good gifts anybody can remember? I mean, I can always answer my own question. I have one. But any good gifts? Just to help move on, I mean, mine was 1984, me and my brother, BMX bikes from Sears. Awesome. Waiting in the living room, Christmas morning, two of them identical because me and my brother get identical gifts all the time growing up because he's only 11 months older than I am. So this Irish twin thing. But yeah, BMX bikes, and it didn't have snow outside. So we're outside riding those BMX bikes on Christmas morning. Really sweet deal as a kid. Second question following up, what are some of the things that would ruin the message of joy someone's trying to share with you, right? Getting to one of those topics shared on Monday, thinking of packaging, right? How you package your joy and communicate that with other people. What's something that would ruin the message of joy for you? Lack of empathy, not knowing a person's situation as you share that joy. Be a good one. Any other answers that would ruin that message of joy that someone's trying to share with you? It's kind of what we're talking about this week, not to take away from it. Right. Comparative joy. Yeah. One-upmanship. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Can't just let it sit. That empathy piece comes back just to say, oh, that's really great. Yeah. It's good. Be thinking about that because this is part of that interaction pattern that people have. Sharing joy can really elevate it again for both people, but if you're not paying attention to those things, you don't have that patience, that empathy, or the package is poor, it really does take away from it. And it feels empty. And again, I don't want anybody to feel empty when they have their joy or feel like it got squished right away. Talking all month about how to preserve it, grow it, deepen it, experience it in the ways you want. And so this is a vulnerability about sharing joy or someone sharing it with you in the wrong ways. I think one of them is, to answer my own question, is the kind of the backwards, um, not in a humorous way, a backwards compliment kind of thing. You know, just this idea of like, well, you know, if you had joy like me, your life would be a little better. That's an ignorant statement that someone's not trying to take a jab at someone, but they just don't realize, again, the absence of empathy and not understanding there's obstacles to that joy sometimes. So again, it's important. We'll come back to it next Wednesday when we talk. But you get really passionate about this week and how it's shared because you can easily, joy is pretty fragile sometimes. We're trying to talk this month how to strengthen it. But for many people, it is vulnerable. So these are ways to try and strengthen it. So some final comments about joy. Recognizing number one, related to packaging. What matters most to you may not matter to somebody else in the same way, right? So what brings you joy may not resonate with somebody else regarding what brings them joy. That's a little bit different than last week. Like this week, I'm halfway through coaching in those big environments that bring me a lot of joy. And I know that some people, that is not what checks their box. But the reality is when someone does share their own joy and someone doesn't reciprocate it, they're not really excited about it. Like, why does that bring you joy? Someone gets offended. Maybe they respond in a negative way. So it's just this reminder, what brings you joy may not bring somebody else joy. And don't be offended if they're like, well, good for you, and they're not celebrating it as much as somebody else. Second, empathy is a skill that can be learned, grown, and developed throughout life. It's obvious that women have a more inherent aspect to be relationally and emotionally done. Guys, if they're not modeled with that empathy, it's really a big gap that they have to work on and grow in and be able to do it that way. But just saying, both to men and women, that empathy is a skill. It's something that all humans can be able to do, but some have had a kind of a shortcut way to model that and be better at it, and others have to really work at it. But in sense of sharing joy, empathy is something that when it's absent, it becomes quite noticeable and becomes a big gap that's problematic. So just wanting to be able to say that that is something that people can acknowledge, and if they're serious about it, they can grow in that and they can be moving forward with it. And finally, I think one of the power of sharing joy with others is that can help bridge the gap between, say, a level of functioning or a status of where somebody is and where they want to be. Because joy is powerful, if someone shares it in a good way with someone around them, inspires them, encourages them, does something that brings them some joy, it helps somebody who's like, I'm right here, but I'm not experiencing life the way I want. It helps move them up toward the goals they want to be able to have in life, whether that's relational, emotional, practical, or experiential. Joy is a powerful thing. It's not necessarily a personal thing. It is a relational aspect that can go a long way. So a good week to talk about sharing this, preserving it, seeing the power of it. We still have 2 weeks left. So next week is about rediscovering joy, and the last week of the month on Wednesday, not just because we have a get together on Wednesday night, but just talking about really practical ways to experience that and make sure it's present in your life. So you have a chance to create situations, environments where joy can happen, because it's too big, too important of an issue to have absent in a chronic way. It's not always the same, but to not have it present throughout the course of weeks or months is something we want to work against. So, all right, good to see everybody. Have a good workout today. Thanks.